Hello and welcome to Current Thinking, Eaton's special broadcast that looks at issues and trends affecting electrical innovation. I'm Hillary Spittle, Director of Global Communications for Eaton's electrical business. Our topic today for our broadcast is one that has increasing significance as the world around us becomes more and more connected: cybersecurity. How are businesses approaching cybersecurity for connected products? And what kind of approach should businesses take when they're thinking about dealing with emerging threats? We're fortunate to have two experts with us today who wake up every day thinking about these issues. I'll let them introduce themselves. Max and Rachna?
Yeah, my name is Max Wandera. I'm the Director of Product Cybersecurity for Eaton. I'm responsible for driving cybersecurity requirements and best practices in how we build our products.
Hi, and I'm Rachna Stegall. I'm Vice President of Connected Technologies and Ecosystems at UL. We work with companies like Eaton and other companies in bringing safe and secure technologies to market and for these emerging ecosystems.
Let's kick things off by talking about the innovations that have led us to this connected world that we're living in. And Max, from your perspective, what are the technology advancements that are really leading innovation for connected products and systems?
Thanks, Hillary. Before I answer that question, I want to first just explain how big of a system we're talking about when you talk about connectivity systems and devices. IDC, which is one of the leading research company in the US, is projecting that by 2025, we're going to have around 42 billion connected devices around the globe. And these devices will be generating almost 80 zettabyte of data.
Zettabytes.
Zettabyte of data.
Okay.
Now, just to give you a picture of how large that number is, a zettabyte is 10 to the power of 21. So you talk about 80 multiplied by 10 to the power of 21 of data that would have to be maintained and processed in the entire infrastructure of Internet of Things, or IoT. Now, in terms of innovation that will be able to support this infrastructure, there's a concept of edge computing that's coming up now. What that means is that we are pushing now intelligence into edge computers, edge devices, and make them more smarter, so that they can now start computing and processing data at the edge level and only decide which critical data to push up. By doing that, now you're not overpowering the entire infrastructure. Then the second innovation that I'm seeing is around machine learning. There's a lot of push of algorithm and statistical models to these machines and computers to make them much more intelligent and perform routine work that's normally done by humans. So those are two innovations that I'm seeing taking place now.
Now we know that really exciting innovations like those come with increased risk.
Yeah.
So what are the cybersecurity implications that we really need to be considering when we're looking at these advanced technologies?
Some of the risks that we need to consider, to be aware of, the first one is having the bad guys or the bad actors leveraging machine learning and AI or artificial intelligence to attack our systems. And these attacks, if they do happen, they're going to be on a large scale. And it's going to be very, very difficult to even notice these attacks. And they require very little investment. And then the second issue we need to be worried about, it's around personal data. So with data privacy now, we are storing personal data on edge computers or edge devices that I just talked about. And the same data is replicated in the enterprise network of a company. And then it's pushed into a third-party cloud. So we have 3 layers of data, personal data, spread across the ecosystem. Now we have to think about ways we can be able to secure those data. And then the last thing is around having a holistic approach to cybersecurity and having the right talent to be able to support that approach. That's another bigger challenge that we'll have to think about it, because technology is changing very fast. And we want to make sure that we're aligning our resources to be able to adapt to those changes.
Rachna, as we think about industries, are there any industries in particular that really can be especially vulnerable when it comes to security, cybersecurity? And what might be some examples of that?
So thank you, Hillary. You know, as I think about what industries might be vulnerable, it's really good to go back and look at what are the bad actors really after, right? And typically, yes, there are some enthusiasts, but majority of the bad actors are really looking for how do they get access to sensitive information. So what might be your intellectual property that you're trying to preserve and getting to that, or if they're your food company, maybe you have a secret recipe that you're trying to maintain. Or are there critical assets that you have in your company that do critical functions? Whether you are a manufacturing plant and you make cars, or you're a yogurt factory making yogurt every day, are there things in your production line that could be impacted? So those tend to be the typical motivation of the bad actors. And some of the industries that really fall around both the access to sensitive information or critical assets that do critical functions tend to be around healthcare and also around critical infrastructure. And when I say critical infrastructure, it's typically defined, in fact, the US Department of Homeland Security has defined 16 different critical infrastructure, but some good examples are nuclear power plants, utilities, manufacturing plants, water treatment plants, things that provide critical functions to society in general. And so what we're seeing is, and I'll give you two examples of recent incidences. In the healthcare space, this occurred last year in August of 2018. It's a Georgia-based Augusta University Health. They had a cybersecurity incident where they had a number of cybersecurity attacks through phishing email all the way back to 2016, 2017. And what occurred in the report that was identified is that perhaps as many as 417,000 patients' personal records may have been breached. And some of these records have details that are very personal, such as, what might be the diagnosis they have, how many times have they come in for care, what is the medications they're taking, a lot of the personal information. And unfortunately, this is the kind of information that is being used at times for medical fraud. In the utility space, in the power space, there was a recent cybersecurity incident that actually happened in March of this year, of 2019. And it's a low-impact power grid operator, and what happened with them was, over a course of 10 hours, their firewalls were rebooting every 5 minutes. And so, they were investigating. They also called in NERC. What the power grid operator did was, they started doing an investigation as to why the firewalls were rebooting. And it turned out that there was a vulnerability, a critical vulnerability in the firewall that had not been patched. So once they applied that security patch, the firewall stopped rebooting, and they were operating as is. And it really shows an example of having the cybersecurity processes in place that looks for updating security patches when there are vulnerabilities, which is a critical piece and part of that holistic approach to cybersecurity.
So we've definitely seen some vulnerabilities at the industry level. But what about applications? Max, are there some specific applications that we're seeing that, with these special technologies that could become especially vulnerable?
Yeah, I think example of applications, if you take on the utility side, on the smart grid. So we are seeing billions of legacy devices that are being powered up and connected online. And these devices were not designed by security in mind. So they're exposing these networks now to vulnerability. So that's one example. And the second example is around semi-autonomous cars or smart cars. These cars are designed to talk to one another. And they're designed to read sensors on the road. And they're designed to talk to street lights, to traffic lights. And you could imagine what could happen if a bad actor could gain access to that network. What kind of safety concerns that can be created by that. And a similar example is on smart factories. We are now connecting production and productions and manufacturing together and trying to make sure that we are now be able to get data that we can be able to predict when machines are going to fail or when they need maintenance. And these are manufacturing area that are creating critical products that if somebody could gain access into those networks, could be a catastrophic event.
Yeah, absolutely. Max, you mentioned earlier that it's important to think about a holistic approach to cybersecurity when we're talking about connected technologies. Before we go on, let's explore that a little bit more. I know Eaton has a very strong point of view on that, so can you share some details on Eaton's perspective on a holistic approach?
Our holistic approach to cybersecurity is designed to ensure that we have the right skill set, the right talent, we have the right processes in place, and we have the right technology to be able to ensure that we are building secure product by design, secure products by default, and secure products when we deploy them into a customer's environment. So what I mean by that, if we take it from ensuring that we have the right we have the right talent and the right skill sets. A few years ago, we embarked on a journey in Eaton to reassess the overall cybersecurity capability assessment of the entire organizations across Eaton that are responsible for building our products. And based on that assessment, we were able to identify gaps that we need to fill. And to fill those gaps, we came up with the following process. We had to develop training, online training that they had to take, and we also had to create on-the-job training plan for all the engineers. Now in Eaton now it's mandatory that any engineer who builds our product has to reach a level of maturity, competence maturity within a year and a half. And we didn't even stop there. We went to also looked at product managers who drive our products and project managers who govern the process. And we also identified training that they need to take based on their roles. And we are rolling that out to them also. So that's making sure that we have the right talent within Eaton. Now on the process side, we ensure that we are building our product by design principles, and we embed cybersecurity throughout our development life cycle. And any product that is built, or any product that's any form of intelligence or embedded logic in Eaton has to go through that process and has to go through our cybersecurity organization to get approval to release that product. Now, when it comes to technology, we have done a lot of investment on solutions. Solutions to help us be efficient and speed up our secure development life cycle. We have invested in code analysis tools that allow us to ensure that we are building codes without vulnerabilities. We have invested on a framework to be able to assess our products, threats, assessment of our products. And we also have invested heavily on tools that allow us to pen test or assess the risk of posture of our products. In addition to that, we have a solution that we have built to sign all our firmware and software to ensure that when they're released to our customers, they're not tampered with. And then now, that's the technology part. Now, the partnership, because we gotta make sure that we are staying on top of current research on cybersecurity. So we are partnered in academia with Carnegie Mellon and Rochester Institute of Technology to ensure that we are staying on top of research, current research technologies that are coming out in the industry, and also to create that talent pipeline for Eaton. And also we are partnering with other companies, industry partners, to ensure that we have that non-advocate review of our processes and procedures and systems and solutions that we have in place. A good example is that we've partnered with UL to ensure that we are driving a common approach on how we assess industrial control systems. So that's in a nutshell is our secure by design approach to cybersecurity.
In order to approach cybersecurity holistically, Rachna, we know that businesses first have to really understand their risk, right? So what should organizations do to understand their own risk profiles?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, we've been doing, Eaton, other companies, UL, we've been doing safety risk assessments for decades. So you think about an individual product, you think about what might be some of the safety hazards that that product can create. And then you determine what are the design features or elements that you're going to introduce into the product to manage that safety hazard. Similarly, we now just extend that and understand what is the cybersecurity risk as it relates to both a product or system or an organization. So really what, risk assessment starts with understanding what is the risk that you as an organization want to manage, right? So understanding risk to your company with the products that you make, how it might be used by your customers, risk to your clients, risk to your brand and reputation, and that extends to also the connected products and systems that you are making. A really good reference is the National Institute of Science and Technology, NIST, has a risk assessment approach in their Identify step. And it's looking at all of that and saying, what is the actual risk that you want to manage, both for yourself as a company and for your clients, and then for your products, and clearly defining for yourself what is your strategy, and then what is the policies that you're going to have in place. So as an example, in Eaton, you have clearly said that we are going to build security into design into every product that we make, and we're going to assess that and monitor that throughout its life cycle. And so that's a really good approach in doing risk assessment, and then making sure that that gets cascaded from your senior leadership to your product development teams, all the way to your distribution, and how you help your customers understand the best way to configure and use your products and systems.
So from an operational standpoint, this is pretty straightforward, but it can't all happen at the technical expert level, right?
Yeah.
Max, what do you see as the role of senior leadership in really understanding the risk profile?
I think it's very critical for senior leadership to understand the risk profile of the organization and the products that they build. And I'll use an example for this to describe this. I think it'll be much clearer. If you look at data privacy laws, the GDPR law that came out of Europe, the penalties associated with GDPR of non-compliance with data privacy is almost 4% of your gross income. And Germany is now coming up with the same penalties for companies that manufacture devices for critical infrastructure that are sold in Germany, because they want to align the penalties with GDPR. Now, for a company that sells those products, you can imagine the penalties that you have to face. If it's 4% of your gross income, that's a lot of money. Now, if you come in the States, you look at California and Oregon, they've done also the same thing. But now they've passed some laws that any company that sells any IoT or industrial things device to those two states by next year, January, they have to comply with some level of cybersecurity requirements that they have come up with. And failure to do that, there's penalties. So you can imagine how many products do we build that end up in California or Oregon? It's a lot of products. Sure. And then just last year, FTC sued a company for selling products that they knew had some vulnerabilities. And they won the case. So this could set a precedent in the next few years where we'll start seeing companies being sued, companies being penalized. So I think it's very important for executives to understand the risk associated with non-compliance and how can that impact their bottom line.
Absolutely. Rachna, do you have some more examples in your experience of actions that organizations should be taking?
Absolutely. I mean, it really needs to vary from company to company. You've got small and mid-size and large multinational companies like Eaton. I think about it from four perspectives: people, process, technology, and training. So from a people perspective, Max talked about having the right skills and right talents. And we know that currently there is a significant gap in being able to get cybersecurity professionals. There's lots of studies. Forbes did a recent one where they're saying that there might be as many as 2.2 million unfulfilled cybersecurity jobs by 2022. But it's important to have access to this great talent. So a company needs to think about, do you want to hire and build your team, or do you want to partner with a cybersecurity company? If you're a really large company and you have multiple product divisions, then you need to think about, do you want to have a center of excellence, or do you want to have a decentralized approach for each of the product divisions? Each of them have their advantages and disadvantages. From a process perspective, Max talked earlier about security by design. Now that's based on Eaton's understanding of clearly what you've laid out as your risk requirements, right? And what you're going to do in terms of a strategy from a security by design. So what are the processes you need to have in place? How are you going to deploy that process within each of your product development teams? How are you going to do software patches? How are you going to determine what is the actual testing you are going to do and looking for these vulnerabilities? And then from a technology perspective, what are the security tools you're going to procure? Are you going to be using more open source tools, or are you going to be procuring some of the more customized tools, some of the best practice tools that might be out there? And then last but not least, I would say is training. Security awareness training is a critical action for every company, not only training each and every one of their employees, but it's training your vendors, your suppliers, and even your clients that buy and operate your products on, you know, when they should be doing these security updates, and how do they also ensure that it's being configured and operated as intended.
Mm-hmm. A lot of things to keep in mind there, absolutely. So we've talked about risk, we've talked about how organizations can really position themselves for success with the guidelines you've mentioned. Rachna, what roles do cybersecurity frameworks and standards have to play?
Yeah, that's an interesting and a really important question. You know, I think about standards and frameworks as they're providing a common language, a common definition, a common methodology and an approach in really building out and using best practices and processes. What I have seen over time has been, you know, typically frameworks or standards get developed when there's a clear issue or need that needs to be addressed in the marketplace. Frameworks tend to be very much more voluntary. You know, guidelines that maybe the industry or the market is a bit immature. We haven't figured out complete best practices yet, but there's a common approach that the industry can come together and develop. And then as the market matures, those frameworks mature and they may eventually become standards. A good example on the framework is the NIST cybersecurity framework I mentioned. It is very broad, but it has really good methodology and processes outlined. And then organizations can then modify those to meet their organizational risk that they need to manage.
So it's clear that one of the most impactful ways for an organization to become more secure is pretty straightforward, and that is to develop more secure products, right? And at Eaton, I know we have a very established process for doing that. Max, can you talk a little bit about cybersecurity and product development?
Yeah, trying to retrofit a product that's already existing in the field is just impossible with cybersecurity, because that product, when it was designed, there was no security in mind. So trying to do that will require you to restructure the overall product.
Sure.
So in Eaton, we're applying a secure by design principle. That's how we drive our products in our development life cycle. And what that means is that we have embedded cybersecurity throughout our development life cycle. And it starts with the day we start thinking about building a product. That's the time we engage our product managers, and we want to make sure that we work with them to understand how we're going to use that product, where will it be deployed, and what exactly are we building. And those discussions and reviewing the architectural diagram help us come up with requirements that the product has to meet before it gets released to our customers. Then once we do that, we engage our development team as they start implementing those requirements. We work very closely with them to make sure that those requirements are implemented correctly and they don't become a bottleneck for our customers in terms of usability. And then once you've done that, we have also to look at the third-party components that are integrated to that product to make sure that we are not introducing vulnerabilities from our suppliers. And also we assess the overall posture of the product to make sure that there's no vulnerabilities that have been introduced as they develop the entire solution. And we know these products are going to be released in the market, and they have to be able to be supported while they're in the field, because as we know, cybersecurity vulnerabilities evolve, and we have to be able to keep up with those vulnerabilities, and that means you have to be able to send patches outside. So we want to make sure we have a process to notify our customers in case there's a new vulnerability of our products, and there's a way, or we have a path to be able to update those products in the field. So once you've done that, the last thing we have to do is want to make sure that all our firmware, if it's a software, it's signed in Eaton. And what I mean by signing is we're ensuring that that firmware or software cannot be tampered with when it's in the field. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the whole security life
The
cycle.
whole process. That's great.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things that Max is highlighting is the need for, when you think about traditional product development teams, we've always thought of them as hardware teams, right, and software teams. And really to build security in now going forward, it's having both the hardware and the software development teams working together. And I know from working with Eaton, that is a really common practice, because right now a significant amount of the vulnerabilities are software related. And it's really important that the product is operating as intended and also the software.
And that's a good point, because one of the things also, to add to what Rachna just said, is that we don't stop when we have developed the product and it's shipped out. We want to make sure that we also give the customers documentations to allow them to deploy them securely. So in addition to just building the product, we want to make sure that customers are aware of how securely can they deploy our product in the environment.
Yeah, that's a critical piece, absolutely, yeah. So let's talk about challenges for a moment. What are some of the challenges in deploying a holistic approach to cybersecurity for these connected technologies? Max, how about some examples?
Some of the challenges that we see is around having the right skill sets. If you don't have the right skill sets, that means that you're going to prolong your development life cycle, because you are learning as you develop. And then secondly is that you're going to miss your market, your go-to-market strategy. So that's one challenge. And then the second challenge that we have, that we see is you're changing the behavior of how we build our products. You're changing the behavior of how we design. You're changing the behavior on how we deploy and how we even use the product. If I could give an example, if you look at 5 to 10 years ago when we had the OT network segregated completely from the IT network, you could use one password for multiple devices, and that was allowed. It wasn't good, but it was accepted because we all knew that those networks are tightly connected and they're not connected externally to any other network. But with the digitalization strategy that's coming up now, you can't do that anymore. Each device has to have its own unique password. The other challenges are around standardization, a lack of global standard across the industry. We're seeing so many countries coming up with their own standards. And for a global company that builds products, it's a bit challenging, because now you have to figure out which standards do I need to comply with for products. So that's a huge challenge across the industry, and I see that being another challenge that we need to worry about.
So can partnerships help? Rachna, what do you see as the benefit and how partnerships are important in the cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah, I think Max has given some really good examples already, but what I see with cybersecurity is you keep hearing from both Max and I that it's a very complex challenge.
Yeah.
And it's very dynamic, right? The bad actors continue to get sophisticated. They continue to find new ways to attack. They keep finding different ways to interrupt businesses or impact brands and reputation. So I really feel, you think about there are new vulnerabilities every day. There might be new trends, but there are also new technology solutions every day, right? And there are new ways to combat that. So it's really important to partner with universities, with governments, with the industry, and other companies within both your domain and outside your domain. Just when I think about, Max said earlier about the challenge with countries coming up with their own cybersecurity requirements, I think the partnership with governments is really critical, because cybersecurity is a national threat. And every country is trying to determine, how do they manage that risk, for their citizens and for their for commerce in general. And so we will need to work together across governments and industry to do that. And I think a really good approach on partnership is what both Eaton and UL has been doing. An example on the Eaton side is, we need to build a talent pool. There's not enough cybersecurity professionals out there, so you're partnering with Rochester Institute of Technology. You're also partnering with Carnegie Mellon. I think, Max, you mentioned that. And that's looking at new and emerging technologies and different security innovations on how to address that back into your security by design, into your products. And certainly we appreciate the partnership with UL in advancing cybersecurity in the entire industry, in the marketplace. And we all have to do these partnerships to really solve this problem together with this interconnectedness that becomes even more important as we move forward.
So as we're thinking about partnerships then, Max, from your perspective, what are some of the most important questions that businesses need to ask of their providers and their partners in helping to manage cybersecurity risk?
Yeah, so it's very important that our partners and suppliers meet the same cybersecurity requirements or standards that we are pushing in our products. So what we want to understand when it comes to cybersecurity with our partners and suppliers is what kind of cybersecurity policies do they have in place for the organization? How do they drive secure by design? And what happens when there's a vulnerability for the component or the product they've sold to us? How will they address it? How will they get notified to be able to react? And how do they manage the supply chain to ensure that they're also adhering to their cybersecurity policies? So these are the kind of questions that you have to understand and know before you partner with any organization.
Sure, that makes sense. So let's look into the future for just a moment. And I'd be interested to know how you both see connectivity and cybersecurity evolving as we go forward. Max?
The future. Let's start with IoT, or Internet of Things. So IoT gives us connectivity to a lot of devices. It gives us the storage of data, give us computing power of this data, and it allows us to analyze the data and give us the dashboards that we see and have to react to them or act to them. And that part is done by human beings. And because of the massive amount of data that we get, sometimes when there's a vulnerability, it will take you a couple of weeks to figure out there's a vulnerability or attack into the system, and by that time it's too late. So what I'm seeing, what we're seeing happening in the industry, in the IoT industry, is they're taking AI, artificial intelligence, and combining it with IoT and creating AI of things. Now AI becomes the brain around IoT, and it replaces the human beings. And now AI it's smart enough to be able now to address and compute and analyze the data very quickly. So if there's a vulnerability, so AI can sometimes be able to take action against the data it gets and or send or notify us very quickly of a vulnerability and can be able to react. It can predict when something's going to go wrong, and we can be able to react very quickly and fix it. So that's one innovation. Then the second one is around software-defined networks. What I mean by that is right now we use boxes for firewall. We are going to see a shift from that. The software-defined network is already there but has never hit maturity. But I can see that technology hitting maturity because we are going to start replacing those boxes with software. And the good thing about that is that this software will be smart enough to be able to look at the network, and there's a vulnerability on a product or a segment of the network, you can take that device or that network offline and still continue operating. And maybe even fix that vulnerability on the network. When that network is infected, or patch it, or patch the device, and bring it back to the network and continue working with very little human interaction. Because now you have to take the box, ship it out, or maybe patch it and put it back. But this will be done automatically by the software. Then the last evolution that I see is around confidential computing. What I mean by confidential computing is that we know how to encrypt data at rest. We all know how to encrypt data that's untrusted, but we have struggled to encrypt data that's in use. So confidential computing is going to give us a full life cycle of encryption of data. A good example is actually in our industry, when you want to configure a file for a device, we can encrypt that file or transmit it encrypted, but when it comes to now applying that configuration file to a product, you can see the data. But imagine all that process encrypted and the device understands the encryption of the file that's getting and decrypt it and just apply the changes. So those are three main evolution I see in a connected world and cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think building on that, Hillary, what I see is, if we go back 15 to 20 years ago, we had very traditional industry domains, the homes that we live in, the buildings that we work in, the factories that we make things. And in the last 10 years, that has started to really blur. And what I see moving forward is it's going to be really difficult to separate, that connected world, right? I have a smart home where I have a lot of IoT devices that I've deployed, and it's all connected through my network in my home, which is connected to that smart meter outside of my house that is connected to that smart grid, right? And it's conveying exactly how much energy I'm using, and it's able to help me adjust, which is also connected to the buildings that I work on, right? And the autonomous vehicles or the EVs that are getting charged in the parking garage in the building to the factory. So what I really see over the next 10 years is this evolution of that connected world, and how are we going to continue to work together even closer across these what have been traditional industry domains that are getting much more interconnected.
Well, this has been a great discussion, and I hope it's given our viewers some good ideas and insights into steps that they can take today and tomorrow to begin really improving security. But before we wrap up, I'd like to give each of you a chance to add some final thoughts. So Rachna, would you like to start?
Thanks, Hillary. We talked about a lot of the innovations, right? So with digitization, connectivity, AI, increased computing capabilities that we now have, big data, there's more innovations today that are occurring daily than ever in our past. And with this innovation, what we're also seeing is tremendous benefit to you and I as a consumer, to businesses that we work in, and to society as in general. One that is very dear to me is I think about autonomous vehicles, right? There are citizens that are unable right now to be mobile and go take care of themselves and go to the doctor or go do grocery shopping, and all of a sudden autonomous vehicles are going to make that available for them, right? In the industrial setting, it's interesting, right? We're going to make the world even safer. You think about predictive maintenance and the ability to have these insights that are going to help us understand before there is a failure, and that will help us make both people and machines safer. And with all of these innovations, there will be a level of risk. What I see is that, cybersecurity is certainly a risk, but I see a tremendous amount of collaboration that's happening between universities and industry and governments and companies in really trying to manage that risk. And I think that will continue, and I'm very confident of the future where we're going to be able to bring these great benefits and at the same time be able to manage the risk.
Great. Max, your thoughts?
My final thoughts, I think cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. And we have to ensure that we apply, for us to be cyber secure, we have to make sure that we are applying the same level of awareness that we apply on physical security. What I mean by that is you can't drive a car without brakes. We know you can't do that. And then we know that when you go to bed, you have to make sure that your doors are closed and windows are closed also. That's the level of awareness we need in cybersecurity for us to be digital secure.
Very important to keep in mind as we go forward. Well, Max, Rachna, thank you so much for sharing your perspective, for your expertise that you've shared and the insights you provided. I think our viewers are coming away with plenty of to think about as they're looking to improve cybersecurity and better understand how to respond to threats. Thanks to all of you for watching today. We appreciate your interest. And if you are looking for additional information on this topic, please visit the links that you can see in your viewing portal or visit eaton.com/cybersecurity.